Do you think you might know somebody who's codependent? Or maybe it's something that you're not sure whether or not you struggle with? Well, codependence is a word that gets tossed around a lot, and I think many of us don't really understand what it means and what it's all about. So here we're going to talk about what it is, what codependence is, and how to know if it's something that we or somebody that we know is struggling with. Because when we really understand what codependence is, when we can start to see it, maybe if it's in ourselves or in somebody else, then we can use that as our foundation of knowledge to then go out and get the help and support that we might need to work through this. Because being someone who struggles with codependence can really impact our happiness. It can really put a damper on things. It can really have a negative impact on who we are and on our relationships. My name is Julia Christina, and I am a therapist, researcher, and online course creator. And I work to help men and women get through the stuff that's holding them back so they can like themselves and their lives more every day. And codependence is one of those big ones that can really get in our way. And maybe we don't know that codependence is the thing that we're struggling with. So hopefully after today, if it's something that you've heard about, that you're interested in knowing more about, or maybe wonder if you struggle with, hopefully things will become a lot more clear to you. So we need to talk about where it comes from and why it happens in the first place. And even just doing that will help you to be able to get more clarity about whether or not you struggle with it. But essentially, before we get into that, I want to just briefly sum up what codependence is in the most succinct way. We will go into more details later on, but for all intents and purposes, if you're somebody who's like, I don't really know what that means, or I've kind of heard little things here and there, but it's kind of convoluted, or it's kind of complicated, or it's never really been clear to me. But essentially, the simplest way to sum up codependence is that it's the need to be needed. It's absolutely needing to be needed. If it's something we struggle with, it's needing other people to need us. And it's the difference between wanting to be needed and feeling good when we're needed, because that's normal as relational beings, as human beings who are hardwired for connection. Being needed and valued and wanted by our loved ones is absolutely essential and normal and healthy. But where it becomes what drives most of our decisions, most of our behaviors, when we lose ourselves in being needed, when we have to be needed, when it becomes everything, when we only feel comfortable in relationships where we feel like the person can't live without us, that's where it can start to become unhealthy and detrimental. And we're going to be talking more in detail about what some of those signs are and what that's all about later on. But first, we do need to talk about where it comes from. So the term codependence originated in the addiction community. So it became the thing that people who had parents who either struggled with alcohol addiction or drug addiction, that they often grew up to become codependent. I'm going to explain why that is, because if you're somebody who grew up in a home where there was addiction or drug abuse or alcohol abuse or whatever, know that it's not that you're a bad person if now you struggle with codependence. We need to kind of understand where this stuff comes from, sometimes so that we can give ourselves a little bit of a break to say, oh, I get it now. And I'm not this horrible, bad, broken, flawed human being, that I've been through things that have shaped who I am now. And now I'm willing and ready to look at it and then do something about it, heal from it, work through it, move past it. And so that's why it's good for us to understand. And without getting all Freudian on you and saying, oh, it all originates back in our childhood. But often how we act now and the things we struggle with now do originate in our childhood. It does come from our childhood, because that is the time where our brains are taking in all of the information from the environment around us. That's where we're being molded and shaped and groomed to be the adults that we are. And sometimes that's really good, and sometimes there's really good things that we learn and that we experience and that we go through. And sometimes there are harmful and unhealthy things that can really cause us some harm as adults, that we bring with us into adulthood. And codependence is one of those big ones. When we grow up in a family where there is someone who has an addiction, and not only now addiction, but now in the research community, we've learned that it also extends to people who grew up in a family where one or both of the parents struggled with a mental illness, a pretty severe and significant mental illness. Because what happens in families where there's a mental illness or where there's addiction is, if you grew up in a family like this, then you know that things were often unstable. Things were often chaotic. Things were often kind of crazy and up and down, and maybe even felt unsafe a lot of the time. That the person who had the issue, the mental health issue or the addiction issue, everyone in the family kind of had to rally around them, because their crises, their chaos, their needs, their moods, their emotions trumped and usurped and took over everybody else's, because theirs were often the most intense. And so everybody learned that their wants, needs, and preferences didn't really matter, because this person's were always bigger, were always more intense. And so then what you learned, it's just what we learned and from what we grew up with, is that the way to feel important and significant and to feel valued is to meet that person's needs, to be there for that person, to rally around that person, to do what that person wanted all the time, almost without question. That it became all about them and really not all that much about anybody else. And that's how we learn to find our value. So then as we grow up as adults, we grow up and it's just natural that that's what we learned, how to feel valued, how to feel important as children or as adolescents. Then as an adult, then we just take that with us. If we don't learn anything really all that different, then how are we supposed to know that things are different, that that's not necessarily healthy, that that's not necessarily a good way to have a relationship? So then we grow up and we often find ourselves in the same kinds of relationships with somebody. Maybe they have a mental illness, maybe they have an addiction issue, but chances are the relationship is a little bit chaotic, and the chaos is oftentimes around that one person, and we find our value and our worthwhileness and our importance and our meaning, and oftentimes even as far as our identity, in being able to meet that person's needs, in being able to be their savior, in being able to solve their problems for them, to swoop in and fix it and make it all better, that we need to be needed. And so that's kind of where it comes from. And that's what it looks like as we grow up and we become adults. And we're not bad people. We're not doing it because we're trying to make life difficult for ourselves, or we're trying to do things that are not healthy for ourselves. It's because it's what we learned. It's because it's what we know. So to have a little, if this is connecting with you, if this is resonating with you, if maybe you know someone who is like this, to have a little bit of compassion and understanding, because this is just, it's what you learned. And so we need to kind of understand what it's all about and where it comes from, so that we can again know how to work through it. Now, in my next video, I'm going to go through 11 key signs of codependence, 11 key symptoms of codependence. If this is connecting with you, or maybe if it's something that you want to learn more about, make sure that you catch the next video, and I will put the link here as soon as it's ready. So we're going to go through the 11 key signs of codependence to help you understand that, and then talk more about what we can do to move through this one, because relationships are meant to be two-sided. Relationships are meant to be healthy and safe, and that both people have a say, and that both people's needs are important. And sometimes we don't really realize that if hasn't been our experience growing up. It can be stressful. It can be emotional. It can be difficult to talk about this stuff. It can be hard to learn about some of this stuff, but sometimes we have to get uncomfortable so that we can move through it, work through it, heal from it, and come out the other side. If you are feeling stressed, if this is something that's bringing up stuff in you, then I do have a tip sheet of 9 unexpected ways to reduce stress. Something little that you can do right now. If you're feeling worked up about this, or anytime you're feeling stressed about anything, the link is here and you can grab that and start using those. Some of them are really fun. They're simple, they're light. Some of them are a little bit more involved, but they're all really useful and helpful and can be used anytime and any place. Make sure before you go that you subscribe, share this one out, leave your comments. I want to hear from you on this. If some light bulbs came on for you, if some things are connecting with you, and if you found this useful, then yeah, please do share it out and do leave your comments in the comments section below. Thanks so much for being here. Take good care.